Afghanistan has dominated the news cycle in the past few weeks, but even before then, some grassroots organizations were calling on Congress to rein in its endless wars. One of those groups is Concerned Veterans for America, which is led by Dan Caldwell, a U.S. Marine and Iraq War veteran. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on.
So first off, what was your reaction in recent days when you saw all the news that's coming out of Afghanistan?
Well, I think it's an unfortunate result of a 20-year war that turned into a failed nation-building exercise in Afghanistan. Obviously, the pictures we're seeing out of Kabul right now are very disturbing, and I think that there will be a time and place for an after action on what has occurred during the evacuation. I think there does need to be accountability. Right now, I don't think it's appropriate to Monday morning quarterback an ongoing military operation, but regardless, I think that the chaos is primarily driven by the mistakes that have been made over the last 20 years, not just the last 20 days.
So when you talk to folks, you talk to a lot of veterans who are recent veterans, but are you also talking to vets from previous conflicts like Vietnam? There's so many similarities right now, it seems, between those two wars.
Yes, we work with veterans from all conflicts. We still have a few World War II veterans that actually volunteer with us. We have a lot of veterans that served in the Vietnam War, during the Vietnam era, a lot of Gulf War veterans, and of course, a lot of veterans like myself who've served over the last 20 years during the global war on terror. And I don't think that I can speak here today for every veteran, and the veteran community is not a monolith. But what we have seen over the past few years is increasing opposition to our endless wars abroad, especially in Afghanistan. And I think there are a lot of veterans very upset by what they're seeing coming out of Afghanistan, but consistently we've seen strong levels of support within the veteran community as a whole for getting out of Afghanistan.
So what, if you went fast forward in the future 20 years, what do you think historians are going to learn from this war? Like, what are the lessons so that we don't get into this situation ever again?
My hope is that going forward, the foreign policy establishment, which has been wrong about just about everything over the last 20 years, my hope is that they and future policymakers, both Republicans and Democrats, ultimately internalize that these missions that we've undertaken in Iraq and Afghanistan to try and turn these ancient cultures into liberal democracies, that these missions are fool's errands, and they aren't necessary for our safety and security. We cannot impose our values, which I'm a proud believer in the values that underpin our constitutional republic, but we cannot impose those values on other people, especially people that have a long history of resisting foreigners at the point of a gun.
Did you go through Parris Island?
I went through boot camp in San Diego.
Okay.
I'm what they call a Hollywood Marine.
A Hollywood Marine, all right. But when you were going through your training, did nation building ever come up?
That's an interesting question. When I went through training, it was in 2005, and almost all my drill instructors had served in the invasion of Iraq, or in what we call Operation Iraqi Freedom 2, which was the big battles in Fallujah, Ramadi, and other parts of Western Iraq. And at that point, the mission in Iraq and in Afghanistan was really starting to turn heavily towards nation building. Now, in the case of Iraq, we should have never gone in the first place. But in Afghanistan, even though we've been very critical of the war effort, we did have justification to go in after 9/11, and we had a few things that we needed to accomplish. We needed to punish the Taliban. We needed to degrade Al-Qaeda's central branch and kill Osama bin Laden. We accomplished those goals long ago, but then the mission shifted
in the first couple of years.
Exactly, to this nation-building effort. And I think that at the time, the Marine Corps was really starting to pivot to this counterinsurgency, nation-building mindset. And frankly, that was kind of a lot of the training that I had leading up going to Iraq. But ultimately, looking back at it, is that strategy we pursued led to more failure and unfortunately more unnecessary loss of life.
So we were talking a little bit before we got on the show that there is some bloat in the bureaucracy. And do you see any ways that may have contributed to some of the nightmare scenario we have right now?
So I think one of the biggest issues that we've seen, and a lot of people in the veteran community right now are laser focused on helping get their interpreters and other Afghans that supported our effort getting them out of Afghanistan. And one of the biggest things that keeps coming up is this bureaucratic, inefficient visa process. And it's really the worst of the administrative state. It's literally endangering people's lives.
It's Kafkaesque. It's right out of a novel.
It's insane. You've had verified interpreters, people that work for special forces units in some cases, stuck in a visa pipeline for 3 years. And it's the same bureaucratic bloat and bureaucratic inefficiency that you see at other agencies that's really infected this process. And again, I don't want to Monday morning quarterback what's going on in Kabul right now, but I think looking back, we need to take a really hard look at how this whole special immigrant visa process played out. You know, they shut down the embassy because of COVID for months on end. People couldn't get their documents in.
And the paperwork just sat there.
It sat here. It had to go through multiple agencies, not just the State Department, Department of Homeland Security. It got, you know, just like a lot of veterans trying to process a VA disability benefit. It was the same type of system that has led these backlogs and frankly right now is endangering lives.
All right. Well, Dan, thank you very much for what you did to service to the country. And thank you very much for what you're doing right now, trying to make sure veterans' voices are heard here in Washington. It's a very powerful voice to have.
Well, thank you for having me on, Adam, and thank you for your work as well on foreign policy, particularly around the issue of war powers.
All right. We followed the groundswell movement to recall Governor Gavin Newsom in California. That movement's popularity is in large part because of one demographic in particular that could change elections for years to come. Newsmax host Steve Cortez will join us next to discuss.